few years ago, I was so broke, I was literally eating out of trash cans. And last year, I made more money than a doctor, an engineer, and a lawyer all combined while working less than 2 hours a day. And I got to live in an ocean view house in La Jolla, San Diego, which is where I currently live. This is all thanks to manifestation, and I want to share how I found this all kind of by accident, my method, and by the end of this video, I want to share how you can do this for yourself. Near the end of my 20s, I was a lost, confused man. Okay, I couldn't understand why women and money didn't make me happy, and I was in the best physical shape of my life, but I was depressed, and I was lost, confused, and I didn't know why. And I tried all these things to feel better, but I just didn't feel better. And I was looking for answers, and the universe gave me a push in the right direction. And by a series of complete accidents, I found myself at a therapy conference in Austin, Texas. Now, at this conference, there were about 20 people in the room, and we were all learning from a licensed psychotherapist, and we learned something about our inner child. So what that is I learned that my childhood was the reason why I was not feeling good. When I grew up, I had an immigrant parent story where I had a tiger mom and tiger parents who always put a lot of pressure on me to succeed, to overachieve in school. And they yelled at me a lot. They yelled at me if I got a B. They yelled at me if I got a bad test grade. They yelled at me if I wasn't studying hard enough. I was never allowed to rest. And what I learned at this conference was that I was doing all of that to myself in my head. The emotions that we have in our childhood are reflected in our adult life. So if you were always anxious in your childhood and feeling unsafe, you'll feel anxious and unsafe when you're grown up. For me, I was experiencing being yelled at and a lot of anger thrown towards me when I was growing up. And so when I was an adult, I was yelling at myself in my head. And I had a lot of anger if I didn't succeed and a lot of shame underneath. So this is something that struck me. It was like a lightning bolt that struck me at this conference. And when it struck me and this thought came into my head, oh my God, I am talking to myself in my head like my parents talked to me. And it's not just me that's doing this. It's you, it's your friends, it's your parents, it's everybody you know. When this thought struck me, I just broke down in tears, and I broke down in tears because I realized I was being mean to myself. I was being mean to myself in my head. And we learned a technique at this conference to write a letter to our inner child, usually just by a journal and a pen. And we wrote a letter to rewire these patterns from our childhood, these emotions and these beliefs that we picked up throughout our childhood. They stick with us our entire lives. And you can unravel and rewire these emotions and beliefs with just a handwriting exercise. And so I started doing this exercise that I learned at this inner child conference, and I started feeling better. Okay, when I rewired, okay, maybe I made a mistake, but instead of yelling at myself in my head like my parents used to yell at me for mistakes, I'm gonna be patient and understanding. Okay, and each time I wrote a letter like this, I would cry, I would have an emotional release, but I would feel better. And then a really weird thing happened is my life would get better. Okay, that area of my life would get better. For example, if I rewired my relationship to women, right? So, I had this big fear response and this big shame response around women that came from my mom. And if I rewired that and rewrote letters, reparenting my beliefs around that, suddenly women would like me better. Okay, more women would want to date me. My relationship to women became healthier. And then I started, I found the healthiest relationship of my life, which is my wife, and we got married, right? So then, the really weird thing is this also worked for money. So I would reparent my relationship to money, to my work, to achieving, and suddenly achievements came easier. Money came easier. And so when I figured this out, I started going crazy because I was like, what is reality? And I'm figuring something out that I don't think other people have figured out yet. And so I started going ham. I started writing 8 letters a day and just going absolutely ham because I just saw the evidence over and over again. The more I do this, the better it works. The more I do this, the better it works. And not just that, each little gain was permanent. So like Imagine you go to the gym and you lift weights once, you get stronger, but then you get stronger for the rest of your life and it doesn't decay. That's what these letters are like, except like spiritually. So, I would remove a block around money and then more money will come to me and it would just stay at that level for the rest, and it wouldn't go away. So it became like an upward spiral. Like I felt better and better. I performed better and better at work. I made more and more money, and that gave me more and more resources to pump more education into myself, into this work. And all of a sudden, my life started blossoming in ways I just didn't think was possible. I started making more money than ever. My love life transformed, and things just became better. And around year 3 of doing this, something even stranger happened, okay? I started getting voices and hearing things in my head, and I thought I was going crazy because I felt like I was hearing the voice of God or something, and I didn't know what was happening. And I would get these downloads for work, right? I'd have a project and I would just see the way the project was supposed to go. I would do it that way, and then it would perform incredibly well and smash records. So I knew I couldn't have been going crazy because my life just kept getting better and I kept making more money. But I didn't know what exactly was happening until a spiritual coach, a spiritual coach or mentor told me that I was simply waking up and I was having a spiritual awakening and I was getting more connected to the spirit realm. And that's what was happening. And I didn't know that's what it was. I just knew that when I felt good, good things happen. And when I felt bad, bad things happen. And so I didn't know that was manifestation, but apparently that is manifestation. And so after all of this, I learned something really important that, I'm coming on to TikTok to share, which is I think there's a gap, okay? I think there's a gap in today's mainstream therapy practices. Therapy is great, okay? So if you go to therapy, I want you to keep going. Therapy is great for getting awareness into your own patterns of emotions and beliefs. What are your patterns? But a lot of times, and this is by no means a blanket statement because there are exceptions to this, therapy doesn't give you a tool to change those patterns. You can be conscious, but all these emotions and beliefs are stored in your subconscious, which is really hard to fight without the proper tools. Really hard to change those childhood emotions and beliefs without the proper tools. So that's the gap in therapy. And the gap in manifestation is I see all these videos of people saying, hey, tap yourself on the mirror 3 times and say this affirmation or say this. And that's great and all. But if you have childhood wounds that pitch you into negative thought spirals and, riddle you with shame and anxiety, and that's what you're feeling throughout the day, it doesn't matter what you do consciously. You won't be able to manifest what you want in your life. And it's only after you heal these wounds that you are able to manifest what you want in your life. So that's my kind of moral of the story here is my number one message for everybody on TikTok is the most important thing you can do in your life is to become aware of your emotions and beliefs and patterns. Heal your inner child, okay? Heal your inner child. And you can do this with the practices that I talk about on this channel, writing letters to your inner child, doing meditations and talking to your inner child, reparenting your inner child around trauma that they had, even trauma that you don't think is trauma. It's just patterns and emotions and beliefs that you picked up in your childhood. And you can access those by accessing your memories, okay? Your childhood memories. And so that's the message I want to I want to spread here. Let me know if that resonates with you, and let me know if you have any questions for me about, this journey and what I have to say.